So of course there are loads of different types of risks. So we're going to look at some of the main categories here. So obviously legal and regulatory risks. The EU AI Act, if you're not compliant with that, or maybe if there's GDPR violations, intellectual property issues, or liability questions. Okay, so there's loads of different legal issues that you need to be aware of when you're using these tools and coming up with your AI strategy. There's operational risks as well. So, systems can fail, you're dependent on these vendors, so that's, an operational risk. Integration problems or data quality issues. There's loads of different operational risks here as well. Reputational risks, as as you've probably seen in the news recently, there's a lot of people are getting kind of caught out for using these tools in a way that is, maybe borderline unethical. So, like I say, if you're not being transparent, for example, then you're not really being fully ethical in the use of these tools. So this can have reputational damage. Okay, and then if you just rely on, if we don't have a human in the loop, for example, and we just have biased outputs and we publish those, then you're going to potentially have a bad reputation from that. So you're going to be losing your stakeholders' trust, which is, of course, a big risk as well. And then there's strategic risks like talent gaps, technology lock-in, competitive advantage, missed opportunities, things like that. So there's a risk management checklist that we've created here, and this is, if you look at the EU AI Act, we'll look at that in more detail in our third session, and we'll go into these requirements in a wee bit more detail. But some of the things are, you need an AI risk register created and maintained, risk assessment conducted for each AI use case, high-risk AI systems have to be identified, so that's a regulation in the AI Act as well. Data protection impact assessments must be completed, that's mainly for your GDPR requirements. Human oversight mechanisms must be defined, so you have to have a human in the loop when you're using these tools. Incident response procedures, insurance coverage reviewed, third-party vendor risks assessed, and exit strategies for critical AI systems. So you can't be locked in, for example, if it is a critical system that you're using. And you need to regularly do these risk reviews as well. At the minimum, would be every 3 months. So if you're looking for selecting some tools, there are loads of different vendors out there, as you probably know at this stage. There's the big ones like OpenAI, Google, and Anthropic. They have various models out there, and there's loads of different companies. So some of the things that you got to ask yourself when you're evaluating these different vendors and their enterprise solutions, what you want to ask is really security and privacy. That's the first thing. How are they handling your data, and where's the storage location? Do they use encryption standards, or do they have access controls? Are they GDPR compliant in terms of the security of your data? And then talking about that, moving on to compliance. Are they compliant with the AI Act? Do they have certifications to say so? Is there audit capabilities, and are their features transparent? So an example, recently would be that OpenAI were criticized for being not very transparent with their ChatGPT tools. So the Italian government actually banned it from being used in Italy for a period of time until they basically became more transparent in what they were doing with the data and their compliance. Integration as well, so you gotta ask yourself, is my existing system going to be compatible with this vendor? Is there API availability? Are there customization options? And what about training? Is there training options for this new vendor? So if you look at the likes of Google and Microsoft, they would have good training, but then you look at some of the other tools out there and the training is not so widespread. And then looking at the vendor's viability, so are they financially stable? Is there support options, exit provisions, all of that stuff. So there's a lot of things that you got to kind of ask yourself when you're looking at these different vendors. And of course, each vendor is going to have, different answers to all of these questions. So just again, a brief checklist for some of the things that you want to ask yourself or check, before you actually get a product from a vendor. So before procuring these tools, is the business case documented and approved? Is data processing agreement reviewed by your legal team? A security assessment completed? Is the vendor GDPR compliance verified and AI Act verified? What about the integration requirements? What about total cost? And then the pilot or the trial period negotiated? And then do you have an exit clause and data portability confirmed? Because you don't want to get your data locked in with vendor. And then, of course, most importantly, is training and support plan. Is that been agreed, or what's happening with the training? So some of the pitfalls, some of the reasons that leaders may not, succeed when they're starting to adopt, or they're trying to get their businesses to adopt these tools. One is technology first thinking. So start with business problems. Don't start thinking about AI solutions. Okay, it's always good to start to think about the problem and come at it from that angle. Underestimating change is another common pitfall. So you want to invest equally in people and technology. Okay, so it's not just one or the other. You have to invest equally in both. Ignoring governance. This is one that is common when you get to a certain scale, a certain size. So you need to have all of your governance framework completely, that has to be the foundation that you build on before you start to scale across the organization. Sometimes a lot of leaders will expect instant return on their investment, and that's not realistic. What will realistically happen is that you gotta try and plan for the next year, year and a half, or even 2 years, and try and if you're going to try these tools out, try them for a period of time before you start to make that expect a return on your investment. It's naive to expect a return instantly. And delegating everything, this is something that a lot of unsuccessful leaders tend to do, is that they don't really engage fully with the process. So it's always good to be visibly engaged and informed in what is happening instead of delegating everything out. And then thinking that one size fits all, that's a common pitfall as well, because it's not, the world isn't as simple as that. So normally what we have to do is tailor our approach for different teams, different use cases. You'll even maybe use different tools depending on what your use case is. So organizations with engaged leadership normally see 2.5 times better AI adoption outcomes. Similar to what we were saying earlier, about if you can create a good culture for AI adoption, then you're going to see 2 to 3 times faster adoption rate than other companies that don't have that. So we'll cover this in more detail in a future session, but we're going to just have a quick brief overview of the EU AI regulatory landscape. So the main one that we will look at is the AI Act. So this is the world's first comprehensive AI regulation, and it just came into force last year. So they're still updating this and they're still making changes to it. So there's another version, I believe, out in September of 2026. So this is something that is constantly, because this is a brand new kind of regulatory environment, this is changing rapidly. So it is. So you need to keep an eye on the AI Act. But like I say, we'll go into a bit more detail in what the Act says. The General Data Protection Regulation is another EU law that governs the data protection requirements, not just for AI, but for any company or business that's handling data. This has been enforced since May 2018. The Digital Services Act, this is more for large platforms, but there are some platform obligations that may be relevant to your business. This has been enforced since 2024, and a lot of big tech companies are getting sued because they are not, they're basically breaking this law, so they're. And then the Liability Directive, so this is going to be liability rules that are AI specific. This hasn't been determined yet, so this is still in the proposal stage, but it probably will be coming down the line. And the EU AI Act, so this is the key date to remember. This prohibited practices and AI literacy requirements. So there's certain things that we can't do, and then like I say, there's certain literacy requirements that we need for employees of an organisation. And this has been effective since the 2nd of February 2025. And like I said, they're still adding things to that, and it is currently changing, and there'll be a new version of it out just after the summer in 2026.